Hola, amigos. Am I audible? All good? Okay, great. All right. So let me get started here, and I will start with sharing my screen. All right. So we're all set here. So hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing good today. Having a great afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you're joining from. Um, and I hope that you're having some tech fun today, ready to learn from insights that I'll present for managing shared mobile devices through Microsoft Intune. But before we start, I do want to have a quick shout out to our presenters us and organizers and sponsors for enabling this exceptionally informational community, so many of us together to learn and grow. So thank you to our organizers and sponsors and everyone watching as well. I am Sucheta Gawade. I work in healthcare IT in the US. I am the manager of an endpoint engineering team. I specialize in modern management and enterprise mobility, leveraging Azure and Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. Moving ahead, here's my topic for today. So shared mobile device management in Intune. It is mainly intended for Intune administrators. And in a nutshell, I'll be explaining and demoing how through Intune you can configure Android and Apple mobile devices to be set up in shared mode so that a single device can be securely transferred from one employee to another, enabling multiple employees to use the same device throughout their day at work. All right, so let's look at the agenda. For the agenda now, to set the stage for different expertise level of audience that we may have here today, I'm going to first do a quick primer on what device management is and how Intune can be leveraged. We'll then look at shared devices use cases for frontline workers and the significance of shared device management. Then we'll understand what specific category of devices we are going to dive into today, followed by identifying how shared device configuration is different from that of regular single user devices. And post that, we'll get to the crux and delve into how Android phones, iPhones, and iPads are set up for shared use case, including demos. And lastly, we'll review next steps, tips and tricks, and get to Q&A. Okay, so getting to the main topic here, let's answer on a very high level, what is device management and why is it critical? How does Intune help? Now, device management means having controls in place to centrally administer devices, regardless of their physical location. You optimize device features for business use. You deploy and update software on the devices, configure settings, enforce security and policies, and also monitor the devices. Intune is a device management solution that can do all of what I just said. I'm sure most of you already use Intune today. This figure illustrates key features, benefits, and capabilities that Intune offers from a device management standpoint. The goal of any organization that's managing devices is to secure devices and the data that they access. So, you can remotely lock a device, restart a device, locate a lost or stolen device, right? And you perhaps have done that in various instances. Such capabilities are essential for devices used for business critical work. You must keep those devices running efficiently as well as secure them. Your frontline workers' shared devices fall into this category of critical devices that need proper management. And having mentioned the term frontline workers and their devices, let me elaborate on that now. So think about doctors and nurses in a hospital and emergency responders who are largely mobile while performing their job duties, or retail associates, factory workers, service technicians. We find frontline workers all around us in various industry areas. They are the employees who are customer facing and work in essential roles, often shift based, and they share work devices among themselves. One of the main use cases of shared devices is to support the frontline workers in their day-to-day tasks at work. Provisioning a device as a shared phone or a shared iPad sets it up so that it can be shared among more than one employee. A single shared device is passed on from one person to another during a shift change, which is why they are called shared devices. Now, frontline workers largely rely on their devices to do their job and enable their productivity. They use the devices for regular email and chat communication or managing logistics and schedules, things like scanning barcodes and so on. If these shared devices fail, user productivity stops as well as the business operation could stop. So in order to enable shared devices to work effectively, you need to ensure they have the right devices, proper configurations, policies, security, and most importantly, a good device experience and a good user experience. And that's where shared device configuration comes into play, which is exactly what we are going to learn in detail today. I'm going to talk about categorization here. So as we dive into learning the management of frontline workers' shared mobile devices, note that we are talking about a very specific category as far as devices go and as far as Intune goes. So devices that are corporate owned and MDM managed, meaning we are not talking about personal devices or BYOD devices. So we are talking about non-BYOD devices that these are the devices that are owned and managed by your organization. We're talking about devices that have no user associated with them because there cannot be a primary user associated with a device that is shared because multiple users are going to use that single device. Our focus today will be on devices which are to be set up either in locked down kiosk mode, a dedicated device mode, or in a shared mode. And basically, I'll be walking you through how to configure Android phones, iOS devices, and iPadOS devices in a shared fashion using Intune for the frontline worker use case. Um, Now, let's look at the differentiating factors because you could ask what differentiates the configuration of shared mobile devices from that of regular single user corporate or BYOD devices in Intune, right? So, well, the differences are in the way the enrollment profiles and configuration profiles are to be set up in Intune. Enrollment, as you'd already know, is the process that enables device management. Now, for Androids, there are two enrollment recommendations for a shared setup: Android Enterprise Corporate Owned Dedicated Devices and Android Open Source Project, or the AOSP, for userless devices. Of all the available enrollment profiles in Intune for Androids, these are the only ones you can leverage for a shared setup. As we proceed here, we'll dive deeper into how the first one, the Android Enterprise Corporate Owned Dedicated Devices profile, can be used, including a demo. The AOSP enrollment method has limited OEM support currently, so I won't be getting into details of that. And similarly for Apple, the enrollment recommendations for shared setup are automated device enrollment, which is very much popular. When enrolling without user affinity, you could use it in a shared fashion. The automated device enrollment is also known as ADE. Previously, we called it DEP. It configures settings using Apple Business Manager. So a connection to Apple Business Manager is very important in this case. The second one here is the Apple configurator. We'll get into details of the Android, the automated device enrollment, which is the ADE for iOS as we get further into the presentation. The Apple configurator profile, however, is not as manageable because this option requires you to physically connect iOS or iPadOS devices to a Mac computer and use the Apple configurator app to deploy the enrollment profile. So we are going to skip that for now. And so coming up here shortly, I'll do a full-fledged enrollment profiles for the Android and Apple that are in bold blue letters on the slide. So bear with me as we get there. Now that was the enrollment specifics, but beyond enrollment profiles, we have configuration profile specifications that make a shared device setup different from regular single user phone setup. There's kiosk mode that can be configured in which we completely lock down a device to transform it into a kiosk with only one app or a few apps available on the device. There is the single sign-on or check-in, check-out configuration, which is part of Entra ID shared device mode. As you would know, Entra ID is the new name for Azure AD. With this mode enabled, devices allow for single sign-in and sign-out between users across participating apps. Then we have the shared iPad mode, which creates a predefined number of user partitions on the device, and different users authenticate into the device using their Entra ID credentials. But these profile types and configuration types are what make shared device setup distinct from how you would set up phones and iPads for regular single user scenarios. So that's the gist here. Now getting into the more technical aspects. And now I'll be covering in detail the specifics for Android management in the next couple slides, and subsequently jump onto the demo right after so you can see it in action. So for Androids, as we learned on an earlier slide, the Android Enterprise corporate owned enrollment is recommended for shared or kiosk style setup. These devices are not associated with a single or specific user and are used for a single purpose, say item scanning or inventory management, barcode scanning. Users are prevented from taking action on the device. And such devices for this enrollment profile can be enrolled in two different ways. First is as a standard Android Enterprise dedicated device. These devices are enrolled into Intune with a user account and aren't associated without a user account, sorry, and are not associated with a user. They are not intended for personal apps or apps such as Outlook or Gmail that require user-specific account data. Then we have the second option, which is the standard Android Enterprise dedicated device that's automatically with Microsoft Authenticator and configured for Entra ID shared device mode during enrollment. Just like the first option, these devices are enrolled into Intune without a user account and are not associated with a specific user. However, unlike the first option, this profile enables SSO between users across applications. So that's a really very helpful option, which would help you to do like a check-in, check-out per user on the device. It is a great option to implement if you're looking to enable users to like sign in and sign out of apps as well as the device itself. So that devices can be cleanly passed on from one user to another during a shift change. And as far as configuration goes, outlined here are the specific settings you should choose in order to set up required device restrictions. The last line item talks about the ability to set up device as a kiosk with just a single app available on the device. Or you can lock the device down with more than one required apps. Then we continue on to the next part of the same topic. Let's see what actions the admins versus users need to take as part of this configuration for Androids. And these steps here are with the assumption that all Intune specific prerequisites and configurations needed to prepare your tenant for enrollment are already in place. Now, for the admin actions, you probably already have your Intune organization account connected to your managed Google Play account. So that's one of the prerequisites here. In case of Android, you create an enrollment profile, which generates an enrollment token, such as a QR code or a string token, and we'll see that in the demo. And that is used to enroll and bring Androids into Intune for management. There are a few different methods, though, outside of these. Now, you continue then to create the configuration profile and have your dynamic device group ready to receive the profile. You need this dedicated group so that devices, once enrolled, fall into the group automatically. And since you would be assigning apps and profiles and policies to this particular group, the devices that fall into the group will automatically get those applications and settings. So it kind of works hands-off. And lastly, you would communicate to your users the method they should be using to enroll their Androids as shared Androids. Or your field technicians or your site support can do that job for you on behalf of the users. So you will provide them the token or the QR code. So basically, the admins or the field technicians are the ones to do the most of the work. work here. And as far as end users go, now, if admins complete the enrollment themselves, then the end users really wouldn't have to do anything. You can just hand the device over to the users, or the users can take a new device, turn it on. They will be prompted for the enrollment method. They will scan the QR code that you shared with them. And subsequently, the enrollment profile and the configurations will finish applying, and the device will be set up in shared mode, ready for them to use. So let's get into the demo here. And with the demo, I am going to show you how things are done for the in the actual Intune tenant. So let me go back here. Sorry about that. I had to stop sharing. All right. So if you can see this, let's see how we are to do the end-to-end setup for Android devices. Now, this is my Intune portal, which obviously you must be familiar with. As far as Androids go, this is the Android enrollment section. And as I mentioned on the slides, the corporate-owned dedicated devices, this enrollment profile, and the AOSP, the corporate-owned user-less devices, is the other enrollment profile that you could use for a shared setup. However, focusing on this one here, the corporate-owned dedicated devices, you go in there, and as you see, I already have some profiles here, but what you can do, you can create a new one, and that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to make a copy of that, so you can have naming syntax, and always should follow a naming syntax because that's helpful when troubleshooting something or when you're trying to find something in your Intune tenant. So you give a name to the enrollment profile, and then you can select whether you want to create a corporate-owned dedicated device profile, which is the bare minimum it would give you for a kiosk or a shared setup, or you can actually go for the corporate-owned dedicated device with Entra shared mode. This one is going to give you the authenticator application, as well as allow users to sign in and sign out of applications as well as the device. So this one is the one you should be using if you want to have a sign in and sign out kind of a setup. So if we go with the bare minimum here, this is where you would select a token expiration date. And so this date previously used to expire after, like, you couldn't have set a expiry date beyond 90 days in the past, but of late it has been changed. And it's really like 65 years now, so which is great. You really don't have to worry about your tokens expiring, because if your tokens expire, your users will not be able to set up new phones with the same QR code. So if I just give a random expiry date here and I say next, it's just going to show you what you submitted here for your setup, and you say create. And this is pretty simple. This helps you create your enrollment profile for your Android shared setup. Now, what we need to do next, as I mentioned in the slides, you have to create your dynamic device group. So I'm going to copy that enrollment profile name because we are going to need it. So if I go to groups, and if I say a new group, I want to create a dynamic device group here. So I am going to select a security group. I'm going to give a group name. Again, always try and have a good syntax here. So I'm going to say devices, Android, say demo here. That's my device group. You can give description if you want to really be, descriptive here for future reference. This is just an option here where you can actually add an Entra role to this particular group in future. So you might want to enable it right here. But again, the membership here has to be dynamic device, because that is what is going to automatically drop devices into this group once you enroll with that enrollment profile. So I'm going to say dynamic device against assigned. Assigned is where you would manually include new devices into this group, and that's not what you want to do here. So I'm going to say dynamic device, and the main thing you want to do here is a dynamic device query. So we go to the query. We need a query to say enrollment profile name equals the value of our enrollment profile that I just created before the group. We need to do this so that this is what is actually going to fetch all the new devices enrolled with this enrollment profile into this group. And then I say save, and I say create. Takes a while to refresh here, but it should shortly be showing up. Yep. So that's our device group. Now, with that device group, now that all our new devices that will be enrolled with that particular enrollment profile will fall into here, we can actually go ahead, create a configuration profile for Androids and assign that same device group to the configuration profile so that whenever a device drops into that device group, it'll get this configuration profile that we are just about to create. So again, I'm going to copy the name. So I have a syntax here for my future new profile. I'm going to say select platform. You have to select the Android Enterprise because that is what is going to enable you for a kiosk or a shared setup out of all these options here. AOSP all limited OEM support, and I'm not getting into details of that one. So focusing on the Android Enterprise. Now you look here, there are too many options. This one really is the one you're looking for, the dedicated, because ours is a dedicated device setup. And you have to select the device restrictions down here. There's also a device restrictions here, but this is not what you'll be selecting because this is more for personally owned work profile phones. This is not for a shared setup. So you go ahead, select your device restrictions, and you say create. Then you give a name for your profile, and I'm going to say demo here, device restrictions, Android demo. You can put in a description, always helpful in future. And then you say next. Now, out of all these settings available here, what is really important is the device experience, because that is where it'll let you choose what your enrollment profile type is. And you can say dedicated device because we are looking to create a kiosk mode or a dedicated device. So we say dedicated device, and then it gives us the option for kiosk. So configure a kiosk style experience on your dedicated devices. And then in kiosk mode, you can either select a single app or a multi-app. So remember what I was saying earlier on the slide, with a kiosk mode setup, the device is completely locked down. And you can have one app, just one app on the device, or you can have multiple apps. So if we go by a single app, it's not going to give a lot more options. You just have to select the application. But if you go with a multi-app, it's going to give you other options here. So this has more control. And if I say a multi-app and I go down here, there's another thing that you can do, which is very important, which is the leave kiosk mode. So if you say it enables IT administrators to temporarily leave multi-app kiosk mode to make changes to the device. So if you enable that, that comes in handy because then you can actually put a passcode here, say 1234. Shouldn't be that easy. You should really put in complex passwords, but that's just an example. So you can use this passcode to actually get into or get out of the kiosk mode. You can get out of your locked device to be able to do temporary settings or changes on the device. Like you would normally see that phone as of your, as how you would see your regular phone if you leave the kiosk mode. So this comes in handy at that point. So that I think is the only going to a multi-app. There's also a managed home screen, which comes into play when you talk about the Entra ID shared device setup, which actually enables login and logout for users. Because with that and with your multiple applications on the device, a managed home screen comes very handy because it enables a sign-in screen, and you can use that for a better user experience or for a better device experience. There are also a lot more other options here with regards to the shared, the managed home screen for a shared setup. So you really want to look at all of these when you are trying to set up something for multiple apps as well as for the Entra ID sign-in, sign-out feature. At this point, let me just go and do a single app, and I am going to go ahead, select an application. This will show you all the applications that you have in your Intune portal here in the app section. So say you want to give the shared users Google Chrome. So you would select the app, say OK, and it's going to show up there. Now, all these other settings in here, the general, or even down here where you have system security, all of these settings are also as important. However, those apply to both regular device setup as well as shared device setup in most cases. So what I was trying to show was mostly what you necessarily need to do for a shared device. So I'm going to keep all the others as defaults, and I'm going to say next. Now here comes the gist of it, where you would actually assign the device group that we created. So first, you have an enrollment profile that we created. We created a device group based on that enrollment profile, and now a configuration of the phone will also have the group added so that devices that fall into that group will get that particular configuration. And this is the group that we had created for the devices. I'm going to select that and say select. And I'm going to say next here. It gives you a nice window to review all the settings, and you can create it. Again, what I did was the bare minimum. You really want to go in, look at all the different options, and choose the best options that you need. But what I was showing was more for the shared setup. So this is the configuration profile that just got created. So that kind of completes the overall end-to-end bare minimum that's necessary for an Android shared setup. The enrollment profile, the device group, and the configuration profile. One thing I should have shown you is if we go back to the Android enrollment, initially when I started, I created this enrollment profile, which actually shows you the token. So if you go here to the properties and then to the token, this is the QR code that your end users will be scanning to set up their Android phones as a shared phone, because this is what you just set up for them. So this is what you need to share with your end users. You can export it from here. So that kind of completes our Android setup, because you can do more. You can do some other things like compliance policies, or there's a whole bunch of other security options that you can have on those shared devices. But again, you'll have to pick and choose what's absolutely necessary for you. All right. So with that, let me share my presentation once again. And with the presentation, I will continue here with what's next for us. All right, if everyone is able to see my screen back, let me get into iOS now. So talking about iOS phones, we so these are going to be the details very similar to what we saw for Androids, where we'll do an enrollment profile, a device group, and some device configurations. It's a slightly different setup than Android. With iOS, it's a more involved experience and a bit different from Android. For iOS and iPad OS devices, as we've learned on an earlier slide, the automated device enrollment profile is recommended for shared setup. So now for shared usage, Apple devices can be enrolled in 3 different ways using the ADE profile. Enroll without user affinity, which with supervised option set to no. Now, the supervised option enables a larger set of configuration settings, such as blocking users from removing the management profile from an iPhone or iPad. So it really helps if you were to supervise your devices by taking advantage of those additional configuration settings. So this first option on the slide provides the bare minimum settings you would need for a shared iOS setup or a shared iPad OS setup. However, looking at the second option, if you were to enroll without user affinity with supervised option set to yes, then you not only get more configurable settings, but you also get to choose shared iPad mode. And with shared iPad mode set to yes, you can configure to allow multiple users to sign in to the same iPad. So basically, with the supervised mode and the shared iPad mode, you have more control and more options available. And then the third option here is similar to what we've seen with Android, where with the Microsoft Entra shared device mode enabled, these devices allow for SSO between users across applications. And then we continue on to the next slide for iOS. Now, as against Android, which only supports device restrictions, for Apple devices, we typically create device restrictions as well as device features profiles. So that's the configuration profiles here. Now, let's start with device restrictions. With this, you can control things like security, hardware, and data sharing. For instance, you can manage users' access to the App Store and restrict them from installing certain apps on the device. And within device restrictions, you can set the kiosk mode, which is the shared mode that that's of our interest today. So similar to what we saw with the Android earlier, kiosk mode locks various settings into a device or specifies a single app that can be run on a device. This can be useful in environments like a retail store where you want a device to run only a single demo app, for instance. And the other configuration you can do as part of this is the shared iPad config. These settings include configuring something like a guest account, enabling anyone to log into the device. Anyone can use the iPad in a temporary session. And that's a great feature. And I will show you where exactly you can set that during the demo. Talking about device features next, this lets you control various aspects of the device as a whole, such as a wallpaper or the dock and layout of applications on the home screen. This capability is not available for Androids. And then turning over to the admin versus user tasks. So the admin task, there are a couple prerequisites which you would have in place already if you're managing Apple devices in Intune. So you create an enrollment profile. You choose to enroll without user affinity for frontline worker shared device use case, as we've been talking about, because these devices must be userless or no user affinity. Decide how your users will authenticate on their devices. Say you want to use MFA, for instance, using the company portal app or the setup assistant with modern authentication are considered modern authentication options. You will also create the device configuration profiles and create a dynamic device group. We'll see most of this in action right after this slide. Then the end user tasks include turning on the device. In most cases, they would just get to the bare minimum prompts during setup based on your configurations. The enrollment and configuration profiles will complete applying subsequently, enabling the device to be used as a shared device. All right, so with that, we get into the demo for our Apple management. So let me again bring up my portal here. All right, give me 1 second. Okay, right here. So in here now for devices, again, we go look at iOS and iPad OS. And we start with the enrollment. Now for enrollment, you are going to start with enrollment program tokens. Like I have shown on an earlier slide, we are looking for automated device enrollment method. And this is the one that ties in with Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager. Business Manager is more for enterprises. Apple School Manager is for educational institutions. And for our interest, we would be looking at a token that should be available here in your organizational tenant, which is going to be the one that ties your Intune to your ABM instance. So, and that token is really the one that facilitates enrollment in case of iOS or iPadOS devices. So then, because here it really needs, for ABM to be fully set up, it really needs a proper organization because it's going to be verifying the organization. And because we don't have one here, the token is not available, so I won't be able to show that. However, we can definitely go create a device group, assuming that we already have an enrollment in place or an enrollment profile. I'm going to go ahead to a group and create a device group for a security-based iOS devices. So let me say devices, iOS demo. And that's going to be my device group for my profile that I would have created for the iOS setup. So with that, you can put in a description. This is pretty much similar to what I was showing earlier for Androids. Again, we are going to use a dynamic device group because that's what we need so that any iOS or iPad OS devices enrolling with the enrollment profile that we would have created would fall into this particular group. So you add a dynamic query. Again, here you choose enrollment profile name equals, and then assuming that we have created an enrollment profile for iOS, with this name, although I did not create one, but assuming that it was this name, as long as we give the query expression, this is where our device group will be ready to take any new devices that will be enrolled with that particular enrollment profile for iOS. So I create that. Again, it takes a while to show. I have about 5 minutes left, but I should be done here real soon. So, all right. So once you're done with your device group, you move on to creating your device configurations for iOS and iPad OS. And I'll quickly show the differences here for iOS setup versus the Android setup. So you go to configuration profiles for iOS, iPad OS, and you start to create a profile. Basically, what you would select out of these two is the templates, because that is pretty easier than having to do everything manually through a settings catalog. So you say templates. And then here, it's two different things that you would do as far as a shared device setup for iOS goes. You would do device restrictions and device features. If you look at device restrictions, it's mostly going to be about controlling security, hardware, and data sharing. And device features, on the other hand, is more about the look and feel of the device. So if I choose device restrictions, say create, I'm going to give it a random name, device restrictions, iOS demo, and then go ahead. So what's important here for our shared device setup is the kiosk mode. So you go to the kiosk mode. It gives you various options here that you can choose from. Now here it is going to ask you the app that you want to run in the kiosk mode. So if you were to select a store app, you have to put in a URL for the store app. It's going to be a bundle ID. If I were to choose just this as an example here, which is an iTunes app, this is how you need to specify what app you're looking for. So you should be able to find online from Apple the bundle IDs of different applications like WebEx and all these other applications that your users are going to need on the shared device. So you can find that, put that in here. And then the other thing here I want to show is shared iPad, which is basically that gives you an option to block the shared device temporary session for an iPad. So like I was mentioning on the slide, there is an option where you can have guest users log into your shared iPad. But if you want to block that, if you really want users with credentials to log in, then you come here and select this for blocking it. Now, given the crunch of time we have here, I'm not going to go and fully create this, but let me also quickly show you how you would create a device features profile for iOS. So you go start again with the configuration profiles. You say create profile. Again, you select a template and you select device features. And then you say create. You give a random name. Always keep a syntax. And then here, what's important here is two different things: the home screen layout and the single sign-on app extension. Let me show you this first. This is what you would use if you are using the SSO mode. So like I was mentioning, you can actually have your users sign in and sign out of devices. If you are using that, you need to use that in conjunction with Entra ID, because that is what is going to enable them to use their credentials. So you go ahead, select this. And then the home screen layout is something that looks like this, where you can actually select where you want to place your applications. Say I want to place this camera app. So I'm going to place the camera app on this side of the screen, App Store here. So you can actually change the look and feel of your kiosk or of your dock, as well as the home screen of your kiosk. So that's what I wanted to show here real quick, because that's really important to know for a shared device setup. But again, I think I'm mostly done here. Let me go ahead with my last slide. which is more related to your next steps. And give me 1 second here. I'll get back into the presentation. We are pretty much done. However, if I go ahead, click next, where do you go from here? So enable your frontline workers to be more productive while reducing negative impact to businesses, with a shared device setup. When assigning profiles, always test first, use a staged approach. Obviously, because that helps, you can see if something breaks, it'll be to a much smaller group. Keep up with the latest. There's always advancements coming out with shared device setups. So I would suggest be on the lookout for any enhancements or developments. And basically, the last item here is for you to enable yourself to do some testing. You can set up an Intune lab for yourself, a free developer tenant. This particular link, I can put that in chat here for everyone, but that is what you can use to actually set up your own Intune tenant and then play around with those settings. And with that, I think I'm good. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. All right, let me stop sharing. All right. If there are no questions, I think we are good. And feel free to reach out to me on the side. I'm still available. I'll be around. And if you have any questions, I can definitely answer. I'll be happy to. Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone.